Hildegard von Bingen was an impossible woman. In a world completely dominated by male university scholars, a 12th century German abbess from the Rhine-Palatinate region wrote one of the most comprehensive medical texts of the Middle Ages. She didn't just pray for the sick. She documented hundreds of herbal remedies, cataloged the medicinal properties of over 200 plants, and challenged the era's fundamental medical beliefs. Modern science has confirmed there's a 1 in 10 million chance she was simply guessing. This is the story of a woman given away to the church as a child who suffered debilitating visions her entire life and who became the most important female scientist of medieval Europe. Hildegard was born in 1098 in the Rhine River Valley of Germany, the youngest of 10 children in a noble family. And because she was the 10th child, her parents did what was customary at the time. They tithed her. They gave their 10th child to the church the way you might give a 10th of your harvest. At just 8 years old, Hildegard was placed in the care of a woman named Jutta von Sponheim at a small Benedictine monastery at Disibodenberg in the heart of the Rhineland. Jutta, only 6 years older than Hildegard, was an aristocrat who had chosen the monastic life for herself. The two became close friends, and Jutta would serve as Hildegard's teacher and mentor for the next 3 decades. Even before entering the monastery, though, something unusual was happening inside Hildegard's mind. She began experiencing vivid, overwhelming visions at the age of 5, blinding lights, cascading geometric patterns, voices commanding her to write and speak. These episodes would follow her for the rest of her 81 years. The neurologist Oliver Sacks, centuries later, argued that what Hildegard described were textbook symptoms of severe migraines. The concentric circles and radiant patterns appearing in the illuminations of her visions are nearly identical, he said, to the visual aura experienced by migraine sufferers. Whether divine revelation or neurological phenomenon, those visions defined her life and fueled an extraordinary body of work. At 15, Hildegard took her formal religious vows. When Jutta died in 1136, the nuns elected Hildegard as their new magistra, their mother superior. Then, in 1141, everything changed. She received what she described as a command from God to begin writing down her visions, and she obeyed. The result was Scivias, a theological masterwork that eventually landed in front of Pope Eugenius III at the Council of Trier in 1147. The Pope declared her writings divinely inspired, and overnight Hildegard went from an obscure abbess to one of the most authoritative voices in Christendom. She corresponded with popes, emperors, and figures like Bernard of Clairvaux. She founded 2 monasteries at Rupertsberg in 1150 and Ebingen in 1165. She preached across the Rhineland, composed music that is still performed today, and even invented her own mysterious constructed language of 900 words, which she called lingua ignota. Scholars still debate its purpose, whether it was a sacred cipher, a monastic code, or simply an expression of her remarkable creative mind, but it stands as one of the earliest known invented languages in recorded history. But it is her medical writings that concern us here, because buried within all of this religious and artistic output are 2 texts that fundamentally reshaped our understanding of medieval medicine. Between 1151 and 1158, Hildegard composed what became the first known medical texts written by a woman. The first, Physica, documented the medicinal properties of 230 plants across 9 books. The second, Causae et Curae, explored the specific causes of disease and their corresponding natural treatments. Together, they contain 437 individual health claims drawn from over 175 different plants. These weren't vague folk remedies scribbled in the margins of a prayer book. They were systematic, detailed, and grounded in direct observation, built from years of working in her monastery's herb garden and caring for the sick in its infirmary. She was working squarely within the tradition of monastic medicine, the practice by which medieval monasteries served as the primary centers of healing and pharmaceutical knowledge in Europe. But she pushed that tradition far beyond anything her contemporaries attempted. The only other female medical writer of the era was Trautula of Salerno, an 11th century Italian physician whose gynecological texts circulated widely, but even Trotula's work did not match the systematic scope of Hildegard's botanical cataloging. Hildegard didn't reject the medical framework of her time. Medieval medicine ran on the theory of the four humors, an idea inherited from ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen. The concept was straightforward in principle. The human body contained four essential fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each corresponded to a temperament and a quality. Blood was sanguine and dry. Yellow bile was choleric and hot. Phlegm was apathetic and moist. Black bile was melancholic and cold. Health meant keeping these humors in balance, and disease meant they had fallen out of alignment. Across the Mediterranean, the Islamic physician Avicenna had articulated similar principles in his Canon of Medicine, a text that would become one of the standard medical references of the era. Hildegard likely never read Avicenna, but the fact that two independent traditions arrived at overlapping frameworks only deepened the authority of humoral thinking. Hildegard accepted this framework, but she expanded it in ways no one else had. She saw patterns of four woven throughout the entire cosmos: four elements, four seasons, four humors, four zones of the earth, four major winds. The human body was a microcosm of the universe itself. And then she introduced something entirely her own. She called it Viriditas. The greening power? This was the cosmic life force that infused all living things, the vital energy flowing through plants and, she argued, through human beings as well. Viriditas wasn't just a metaphor. Hildegard treated it almost as a fifth humor, a force that could dry up within a person and lead to illness, or be replenished through proper food, herbs, and living. When she compared a physician to a gardener tending plants, she meant it literally. Healing was cultivation. That philosophy produced remarkably specific remedies. Hildegard highlighted 3 plants as essential to daily human health: spelt, fennel, and edible chestnuts. Spelt, she wrote, rectifies the flesh, produces proper blood, and creates a happy mind. For coughs, she prescribed fennel and dill boiled in wine with horehound, then strained through linen. For digestive problems, ginger ground with marigold juice and baked into small cakes. She introduced eyebright as a treatment for eye ailments, a plant modern science has confirmed to be astringent and anti-inflammatory. She even differentiated eye treatments based on whether the patient had blue eyes or brown eyes, and she didn't shy away from subjects other medical writers of her era wouldn't touch. Hildegard wrote openly about the female reproductive system, about sexuality, about menstrual pain. Her writings contain what may be the earliest known description of a female orgasm. She expressed genuine sympathy for women's suffering rather than framing it purely as divine punishment. She didn't reject the prevailing belief that women were the frailer sex, but unlike male scholars who used humoral theory to denigrate women, Hildegard argued that female difference held its own vital place in nature's grand design. So how accurate was she? In 2016, researchers applied a rigorous statistical analysis to Hildegard's herbal claims, comparing them against modern scientific evidence for those same plants. The result was unambiguous. The correlation between her medieval claims and modern herbal indications was highly significant, and the probability that she achieved her correct claims by pure chance landed at 1 in 10 million. Her work wasn't guesswork. It was empirical medicine dressed in the language of faith. Her influence extended into the centuries that followed. The Gart der Gesundheit, a 15th century German herbal encyclopedia that became one of the first botanical books ever printed, drew explicitly on the tradition she helped establish. Today, about 3% of Germans actively practice what is known as Hildegard von Bingen medicine, with particular interest among cancer patients seeking holistic approaches. Dr. Gottfried Hertzke practiced Hildegard medicine for 30 years using Causae et Curae as his clinical guide. A 2026 exhibit at Yale titled The Roots of Healing highlighted her Physica as a foundational text in the history of medicinal botany. Hildegard died on September 17, 1179, at the age of 81. She was regarded as a saint in her own lifetime, but the formal canonization process, begun 50 years after her death, failed 3 separate times. It took until 2012, over 800 years later, for Pope Benedict XVI to officially canonize her and name her a Doctor of the Church, one of only 4 women ever to receive that title. He called her perennially relevant, an authentic teacher of theology, and a profound scholar of natural science and music, a child tithed to God, a woman who saw blinding light where others saw nothing, a healer who treated the body as a garden and the garden as a mirror of the cosmos. Hildegard von Bingen did not just practice medieval medicine, she transcended it, and 9 centuries later, science is still catching up.